All right, Reefers, we are hanging out here in the retail store and we're sitting in front of one of Kevin's brand new projects. Kevin, thanks for hopping on with me on the channel again.
Definitely.
Always fun to have you on here, but today we're gonna be talking about a brand new display tank we have up and running in the retail store. I'm gonna let Kevin take it away. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the tank itself, some of the equipment before we get into the rockscape and all that good stuff.
Yeah, you know, I've always liked the all-in-one tanks. You know, there's just kind of a simplicity to them that allows you to, you know, have just a basic filter box without a whole lot of other things going on, equipment outside of the system itself. And you know, being that it's a little smaller in water volume, you have a lot of control to do, you know, more detail work, I would say, and you know, kind of simplify things as far as mostly maintenance with water changes and, you know, if there's problems and that sort of thing. It's usually a quick fix. So it's kind of a, you know, a nice little all-in-one box that allows you to, you know, really kind of get hands-on and get into the detail with this aquarium. And these Innovative Marines, they run really, really well. The filtration on them works great. They give some customization as far as, you know, the way they work with the caddies, where you can actually run multiple compartments with different media and stuff like that. They have filter socks if you're looking to polish it and you prefer to go that route. You know, sometimes even roller mat modifications have been used on them. But yeah, all in all, you know, it's looking for a nice, simple tank that we could put smack dab in the front when you walk into the retail store that kind of catches your eye. And you know me, I always like to kind of try something different and push the limits as far as, you know, what we're doing. I mean, I've thrown together quite a few Innovative Marine tanks, and I feel like each step of the way on the journey, I kind of pick up a few new tricks. And, you know, once I kind of put that in my tool belt, I say, hey, wait, what can we do to kind of kick it up a notch and, you know, try to push to the limits even further. And you can kind of see this tank is very unique.
For sure. So 50-gallon display in total, right? And then in the back, we have, what are we running for? I know on your display in your office tank, you have the squid you're utilizing. I know we've done some crazy modifications to this one. What kind of modifications have we done underneath?
Well, the flow was probably one of the biggest modifications that I decided to kind of tackle on here. You know, just the aesthetics I was trying to go for. One thing I've never really liked in a reef tank is just seeing all the cords and pumps and equipment in there. I just feel like it really takes away from the look.
Yeah.
So with this tank, I was trying to kind of incorporate things I've done in other displays, like my personal tank at home, where I'd hidden the power heads kind of in caves and in the rock work, and some of the things I had done on, you know, the 30-gallon that's in my office, incorporating the squid and upgrading the pump to a much stronger pump to kind of rely on that rather than using power heads. And you know, that's a little harder to do on a very large tank, but on a tank this scale, it's something that we were able to accomplish pretty effectively with what we've got going on here. Now, to kind of go into the details of it, the main return pump, you know, is pretty good on this tank, but I did end up boosting that up to an SDC CJ pump with a pretty good GPH rating on that. Now, the reason why I wanted to boost up that flow even higher is because I was incorporating that squid. If you notice here, you see the surges that go back and forth. The squid uses gears inside that rotate and then use a diverter which shifts the flow back and forth. And then on top of that, we use the Innovative Marine spin streams here that again use gears to rotate around and create more variable flow in the surges. And that gets a good amount of flow. But being that the dimensions of this lagoon style tank were much deeper front to back, and you know, obviously we have a lot going on with the rock work here, I thought we'd have to kind of kick it up a notch. And I really didn't want to have to add power heads to the walls or put things on the side panels of the glass. You know, again, just trying to keep with that clean aesthetic. So what I ended up doing is drilling this tank out and installing a true closed loop with another variable flow SDC. Now those things are kind of cool too, because you can actually program them so they get options to run variable speed fluctuations too. You can have it kind of toned down throughout the day or at various points, or at nighttime if you're trying to let things kind of calm down in there, more for feeding LPS or the fish, that sort of thing. So, you know, it really gives us a lot of options for controlling that flow. And then the closed loop is plumbed in with an inverted squid attached to that SDC. So it actually goes downwards with the squid acting as a T, and then splits off to 2 returns, which I ended up drilling bulkheads for on the right and the left side here. Now, currently, some of the rock from the display I had actually removed as we're trying to really speed this tank along. So I ended up throwing a couple of the back pieces into one of our farm systems just to really kind of mature things, which, you know, if you're ever starting a tank, I'm sure a lot of hobbyists know, you know, sometimes quickest way to victory on that is to just really take a great tank and drop the thing in, and then, you know, really kickstart things, get the core line growing even faster. So that's what's going on here. But if you look, the lock line running from those bulkheads actually traverses through the sand and under the rock work, and then comes out here and here into these embedded islands. So again, with that squid, it creates a surge pattern which shoots the water back and forth. Now, one thing I know from my experience with a lot of these tanks is when you have all the flow coming from the back to the front, it just never seems to run quite right. It doesn't get the dynamic flow that I like. And I didn't want to have that be an obstacle in here long term. So by adding those with a much stronger pump, it really does create a pretty good amount of turbulence, which I'll have to send you a clip I had taken when I was testing the flow. You can see these things actually are strong enough to kick all the way up to the top of the water and create a nice upwelling when they're running full power. The last thing that really I kind of think I went crazy with was the wave box. Now, you don't really see it here, but that's one of those products that the first time I ever saw it, years back, a guy in the Reef Club had it in his tank. He had a big display tank, just rocking back and forth with that standing wave. It just had a really, really unique look. And what I liked about those standing waves too is a lot of times it's hard to really accomplish that with just a regular power head. With that too, when you're running a power head, a lot of times it just hits so hard on that flow. But with the wave box, what it does is it actually has short interval surges that you can program depending on the dimension of the tank. And then it'll have the water rush out of an enclosure and then back in when it kills the power. So it has some effect as far as the water displacement in the display, and that's kind of where you see the up, down look that we're able to get here without necessarily slamming the tank with too much direct flow, because again, this is a fairly small dimensioned tank, so we didn't want something that was just going to hit the front glass and constantly be kicking the sand back. And the cool thing about those standing waves that I've always loved the look of too is with corals that have a lot of flow, like gonoporas and torch corals, hammers, even clove polyps and some of the softies, is you kind of get that nice back and forth rocking effect, which I'm really hoping stands out on this display. Now, to do the wave box, probably wondering where is it, right?
Exactly.
So if you look back into the tank, you can see there's actually a bulkhead on that wall. Now, what I had done with that is had drilled out a 1.5-inch bulkhead, which was pretty much the diameter of one of the Tunzi pumps as far as the output nozzle on that. And I had trimmed the bulkhead down as low as I could so I could kind of squeeze it in there. And then it actually taken a tiny little stem of 1.5-inch PVC, had used a special type of glue to attach it to that, and then embedded it into the actual bulkhead. So the shared zone on this all-in-one where you have your filter compartment with a baffle and then another baffle where the water spills over. The second zone is where that pump is. And that's where you'll see the water kind of pulling up and
doing
down,
that rocking
up
motion.
and down and shooting through. But if you put your hand in front of this pump nozzle, it really doesn't feel all that intense. So I think we're going to be able to accomplish that nice wave effect without slamming a lot of these corals right there, and you know, still getting that nice look.
For sure. So much thought went into, obviously, the flow in the tank. You got tons of turnover. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on. You had to do a lot of thought as well when it came to the rockscape. Yep. I know we were going to talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about first too, the lights. We're lighting this tank up. You guys are going to see in a lot of the clips that we're going to show, this thing is really going to light up here soon enough. Yeah. But let's talk about a couple of the lights that we got up over top of this system right now.
Yeah, it's definitely another unique thing about this. You know, I had seen some interesting tanks like the one Jake Adams had done years back, where he had, you know, the Kessel cannons mounted from the ceiling or significantly above the system. And I thought that was a really nice look, you know, just not having lights kind of floating above it or brackets coming off the back. Again, just to kind of create that more open aesthetic. I just love that look. And if you kind of glance above, it's probably a bit overkill what we have here. You know, we really wanted to try out these track lights from Kessel. I heard great things about them as far as the intensity and power and the tight angled lenses that they use. So, you know, once we got these things jump started, we thought if we put lights a little further in front at an angle with the way this rock work is, it would allow us to kind of shoot the lights a little bit more to the face and underneath and into these cave areas to get at least enough light where we could keep some different species of coral that won't necessarily you know, need a lot of that real intense punch. But that being said, even these things being on the roof, if we really wanted to ramp it up, I could grow acros on the sand bed in this tank.
Yeah, no kidding.
They do the job. And to your point too about having you know, this thing really well lit, is this top area. It's hard to tell right now, but the goal with this is to have a mangrove tree actually growing out of this display and eventually kind of creating a canopy over this area. And one of the spotlights will be dedicated to hitting that with a little bit variable spectrum, hitting it with more daylight, just to really try to maximize the growth and health of that without hopefully getting too much into the display tank, so we can still get that nice pop on the corals and everything. So that's something that'll be going in here soon. And then the rock work up top, I had some other plans in mind too. I'm sure you have a good feel for what is coming on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you guys have seen, obviously in my studio tank, the nano tank, we've done a lot of that really cool and intricate work. I'm sure you've got some awesome ideas. I really do love the concept of adding in a mangrove into a system. I think it brings a really nice natural aspect to a tank. And I think something like this, it's gonna be obviously super dynamic. I think that's gonna look really cool. I don't think you mentioned it too though, but there are some awesome saltwater waterfalls going on here too. You ended up plumbing that through the rock work, correct? And then this is multiple pieces, right? All together into one, making this scape.
Yeah. So we'll get to the next part that was a pain in my butt as far as you know, design and experimentation and you know, the build on this tank. The Waterfall was something that I always loved the concept of. I mean, I had seen a handful of those incorporated more in freshwater tanks, and you know, I think a handful of people have done it in saltwater in the past. You know, so that's just something that I want to kind of take it to the next level. You know, with doing the rock work, doing air plants, things like that on the display, which we're probably going to end up doing that as well. Thought it'd be really unique having that visual aesthetic too, to create a little bit more action into this upper area. You know, really thinking outside of the box of the aquarium and having more to look at than just what you see down here. You know, my thought on it is there's more to just the tank than having a handful of you know, pieces just in the middle with a few corals. You know, you can really get more creative with it. And this part was, you know, like you said, a bit of a project. The waterfalls themselves, you know, I'd pieced together the rock work from, and then had used a special type of epoxy molding to create the channels. The reason for that is I didn't want the salt water to seep through all the rocks and really, you know, create a salt creep mess as much long term, and to help allow that water to really be channeled. There was a lot of intricate little details, you know, going through with a drill bit, trying to create different areas. You'll see the main one diverts over here to over here to over here, and then there's a whole separate waterfall that goes to this side. And these pieces were built not just as one giant platform. You know, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, how the heck's he ever gonna get in there to fix a pump if anything goes bad, or, you know, clean the back? Believe it or not, this is a multi-sectional piece. So the part here with the pump that you were talking about for the waterfall actually comes up with an AI pump, shoots up in here, diverts over with the little spillway down into the trough, and then trickles down and disperses there. So, you know, all in all, it works really well. And then this left piece is a whole separate unit that can be lifted off the tank and removed if we have to do any work with the pump itself. So, you know, obviously that takes a lot of planning and thought and having to make it fit perfectly so we can get in there. In addition to that, the right side again has another section here hiding the plumbing, so you can kind of see over here. Even incorporated some valves too if we have to balance the flow. The pump is variable speed, so we can adjust that as well if we, you know, need to tone back the flow on the waterfall if we're getting a little too much splash or salt creep building up over here. You know, and played around with a few different things. Tried a little maxi jet at first. Man, that sucker was vibrating. It was so loud. But once I settled in on that AI, it worked great for this purpose. And the waterfall's working great so far. You know, one of the things I'm a bit nervous about long term is obviously some algae. You know, you can't have your typical cleaner crew cruising around down here. So, you know, we may end up having to do some toothbrushing here and there just to keep the channels clear.
Gotcha.
I do think it'll have some benefits, almost being like a natural algae scrubber as far as the tank goes too. And I've even, you know, dropped some hermits and snails in some of the pockets up here periodically, and I think I'll end up doing that as things progress. But yeah, the waterfall I think was a success. It was my first time trying that, and I'm very happy with the results.
Obviously super unique. The saltwater waterfall, I haven't seen it before. The flow, the lighting, the scape itself, such a cool tank. I cannot wait to see this develop over time. I'm sure a lot of people are curious and wondering, what's the plan for this system and what are you thinking about doing, you know, when it comes to stocking and, you know, the direction you're heading when it comes to the end goal for this tank. Obviously, we're gonna be doing a big mangrove, adding that in, trying to bonsai it, create that canopy. But what about livestock inside this?
So inside the display tank, you know, if you look at the way the rock was built, I would say still fairly minimal outside of this large structure in the upper tier. A lot of branchy looks to it. You know, some people find that a little confusing when you start thinking, hey, how are you gonna mount frags and how's the coral gonna grow? But when I go with a branchy style structure, the goal is to usually stick with more flowy corals or corals that tend to fill out that open space. And you know, everyone who knows me knows I love SPS, but this tank wasn't built for SPS. You know, if I mounted that stuff up here, it'd end up just creating such a canopy that it would shade out a lot of the lower tier items. So, you know, I think a lot of the things we're gonna stock is more of a general mixed reef, mostly LPS and, you know, softy dominant. Lots of flowy coral, like I'd mentioned with the wave box. I think it'll really make a dynamic display once we get a whole bunch of Goniaporas and maybe some Euphilia just dancing back and forth. coating these rocks with some nice softies and zoanthids and LPS. A lot of these back rock structures I think would be great to put, maybe some acan gardens, some pockets with various mushrooms, maybe some chalices coming off the edges of the rocks. That's one of those things I think when you really kind of plan things out, even on vertical faces, if you're good with the epoxy and the glue, you can mount a lot of stuff and have it kind of tear up and fill those voids. But that's my vision with it. And I think there's some unique opportunities too to maybe even incorporate some non-photosynthetic corals.
I was thinking the same. I was thinking, underneath the ledges, that's where you see a lot of sun corals really enjoying, hanging out. I think that would be really cool to see those. Maybe some non-photosynthetic, gorgonians, things of that sort. But I want to say thank you so much, Kevin, for taking the time. I know it's Friday. You got a lot of busy stuff going on in the farm. We'll be showcasing that. Everything's happening all the time around here at Top Shelf Aquatics. If you guys are local to the area or you're ever coming down towards Winter Park, stop on in, check out the retail store, check out this amazing display tank, and be sure to come in by the farm. I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in, Kevin for stopping by. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future uploads.